Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Ajahn.
So today is Tuesday, the 25th of May. Thank you for taking time to share some more Dhamma with us. Some people have expressed a lot of appreciation and interest in the topic that you covered recently about self-righteousness. Could you speak some more about that and how to practice with it, please?
Yes, that's an important issue in the human individual's life because right and wrong are very much conditioned into us, what's right, what's wrong. Even in the Eightfold Path right view and right understanding, using right as a kind of absolute, a kind of absolute position to take. And but in terms of reflection, right is a sankhara as well as wrong, so wrong is rises and ceases in the sense of being right as an individual. My view is right, your view is all wrong, my side of the political spectrum is right and your side is all wrong. And in regarding to relationships, I'm right and you're wrong. We see it in the Sangha, views about Vinaya, about being right and wrong. And these can be, really emphasized and taken into and grasped to be a very kind of warlike, argumentative position to take, to being righteous. And just noticing in oneself this sense of I'm right is awareness of that's because it's a created state. Nobody can feel right all the time, that I'm right, it arises according to other conditions. And so with awareness, mindfulness, conscious awareness is our way of putting it into perspective. And so it can be right but not true, true but not right. And so these kind of conundrums, these koans, are important to reflect upon, because I've seen in monastic life very righteous positions taken, and about anyone who doesn't agree with them or take their interpretation of Dhamma Vinaya, and become very fixed and self-righteous, defensive and argumentative without being aware of what they're doing. So, we can all feel, like our tradition is right and our view of life is right and our political view is right, or, if you're on the left of the spectrum, it's left is right and right is wrong. You get entangled in the whole mental proliferation around right and wrong, where it's wisdom to see that right and wrong are not absolutes. There's no absolute right, no absolute wrong. And the word absolute is an interesting word because we tend to absolutize our positions, the sense of ourself, our life, and we believe in absolutes, like God is an absolute or Dhamma is an absolute, and so this word itself is a sankhara, absolute, and so we talk about the empty consciousness or voidness or pure awareness. Doesn't have any absolutes in it. It doesn't form absolutes with conditioned phenomena, with words, with ideas, with ideals, of taking fixed positions that are, held to where it is quite self-destructive or destructive in relationships. So, the freedom of realizing the one's conditioning cultural conditioning, religious conditioning is very righteous. So and religions are all about right, being right and absolute. So in religions, they tend to absolutize relativity, reify conditioned phenomena and make it more than what it is. Where with wisdom, we're aware of that my view of what's right is like this, it comes and goes. It's relative to other conditions. And it's not a permanent, if I grasp it from the ignorant level, from ignorance of Dhamma, then I become a very righteous personality that always has to be right. And, you encounter people like this where, they argue because they always determine that they're right and they've got to prove that they are right, that you're wrong. And you try to hold a conversation with them, it's impossible. Because they've already fixed their position. They don't listen, they aren't aware, there's no wisdom in their holding the position. It's just an ideal and a belief that they grasp. Because all beliefs are sankharas, are conditions, are phenomena. And this is where it is this kind of vipassana style of insight practice where you're investigating phenomena, where you begin to see, notice, recognize phenomena. Thoughts are phenomena, memories are phenomena, emotions are phenomena, the body's a phenomena. So, these are conditions or forms that arise and cease, born and die, begin and end. And this is where the practice of patient endurance is encouraged in meditation, to relax and observe, be the witness, the puto, the witness of phenomena as it arises and ceases. And if you're just aware when it arises, then you grasp, if you have a righteous position to take and you grasp it, you don't see the cessation of righteousness. You have no insight into the way things are. You just fix yourself with a karmic connection to what you consider right view, and hold that against all odds, against all discussion, against wisdom itself. So, it's like cultural conditioning is very strong, because that is what you get when you're an innocent child, from your mother and father, from your family, from your social identity. And and we can't help but have this sense of, what my generation, how I was brought up, my view of morality, my view of religion, my view of what's right and wrong, what's good and bad, and then like an atheist who doesn't believe in God is still taking a belief. You don't investigate what God really is. It's a word, 3-letter word in the English language. But what do you mean by that? So somebody asks you, do you believe in God? And if you say, no, I don't, then you've just taken, you don't believe what they believe, or what the traditional religious take on the word God is. So you're considered an atheist, a heretic, or, an atheists are bad and believers are good. And so you divide the experience into two sides, of one opposing the other. And you're lost in that. Is what samsara vata is, what the samsara, the world of delusion that we live in, if we don't develop and depend on religion, we depend on wisdom as our guide. Like in the tradition that we're from, the Pali Theravada tradition, and wisdom is Dhamma, is reality itself. So it's not something that we lack, that we don't have. We just don't notice it when we're bound into the conditioned reactions that we've developed from our early childhood, innocent period where we just absorb everything, whether it's right or wrong is not so much the issue. You just take in what you're told is right and you believe that anything opposed to that is wrong. You don't question. You don't investigate right and wrong. So we have, amongst all the idealists in the world, and, it's interesting to be a monk, an American bhikkhu in Thai tradition, because, your whole American cultural conditioning is quite challenged by it. And, because it's very different cultural conditioning when you're living in a Thai forest monastery in northeast Thailand, and a very conservative traditional form of Theravada Buddhism, but very investigative, like Luang Por Chah was always encouraged this investigation into observing, being the witness of how things rise and cease in conscious awareness. So in the training as a Buddhist monk within a very conservative, very strict disciplinary code that was not part of my life in any way before when I was a layperson living in California. It was a kind of jumping into the deep end of the pool and surviving because one had, I was very idealistic, conditioned to be very idealistic. And so as a graduate student at Berkeley, I was very much into peace movements and things like that, marching for peace, protesting against war, protesting against the Atomic Energy Commission, protesting for freedom of speech, and, a very liberal, idealistic cultural conditioning, social conditioning that I'd received. And, one was so critical as a student of the American political system, of Christianity, of everything that I'd been brought up to totally accept as the best and right, because the American cultural conditioning is very righteous, as well as the Christian one. So you're brought up with this very strong sense of right and wrong, and what's, belief in progress, and belief in God, and belief in democracy. These are all very beautiful ideals as such. But, it leaves you emotionally kind of totally confused, because life isn't an ideal experience. There's no country, an ideal country, no ideal religious form. They are conventions. All religious forms are conventions. They arise and cease. They begin and end. They're not absolute. But religion at its best is pointing to God or to Dhamma or to ultimate reality rather than defining it. And this is where this witnessing position is an encouraged way of investigating, to be the observer rather than the participator, the believer, the one who believes or disbelieves or passes judgments on in every condition that you experience.
Then I'm assuming that if we have become accustomed to live with self-righteousness as part of our cultural conditioning, and maybe something that's quite difficult to recognize at first.
It's not very difficult if you trust your awareness. Because, being right, when, for me it was quite obvious how much I suffered by my righteous views. Because life wasn't conforming to my ideal of what's right. I wasn't able to conform as a person, as an individual, as a citizen, as a member of a religion, and yet I held these ideals, they're beautiful ideals. I'm not condemning them. Democracy is a great idea, and so is Christianity, and so is God, and freedom and individual rights, and all these are, as ideals, they're the best you can possibly create, with words, with thoughts. So they inspire. They inspire the superlative speeches, righteous speeches, or it can be very inspiring to people because people are confused and ignorant. And so, somebody that seems very confident, very sure of themselves of the right path or the right way or the right view can be very, compelling, charismatic through being very righteous and opinionated. We can see that in modern politics today. This how charismatic, being convinced that you're totally right, draws in millions of people into that particular position. But they don't know what they're doing. They haven't a clue of what right is, but somebody that says, I know what's right on how to lead the world and save the democracy and save religion, and what is the true religion, what is the ultimate religion, and is religion right or wrong? And atheists can be very convincing, because they're so rational. And, on a rational level, you can't prove God as something objective form that you can hold out or describe as an object. So all the anthropomorphic manifestations of God, can be easily condemned, or rejected. Like the old man white beard up in the sky. That's like Santa Claus. It's believable when you're a quite innocent child, but as you grow older, you realize it's just a myth. And so this freedom that the Buddha encouraged in his teachings that are pointing towards reality here and now is very much appreciated, because it's not a belief system. Buddhism itself, anybody can believe all kinds of Buddhist ideals and realms of deities and bodhisattvas and arahants, and you can believe in the words and the scriptures, but the actual teaching of the Buddha is this investigation. Words are created conditions. They're phenomena. The language is a created function, and where consciousness is not created. You don't create consciousness. There's not a Buddhist consciousness and a Christian consciousness, or a personal Ajahn Sumedho consciousness that's separate from Ajahn Asoka's consciousness. I can believe that, on a belief level. And, if that's what I've been told and I don't question or investigate the present moment, the reality of here and now, then I believe what I'm told. Because the teachers, the masters say so, the priests, the imams, the rabbis, everybody says what's right and what's wrong, and what you should believe and what you shouldn't believe in. And, one quite innocently accepts all that. But this is a time for awakening to the way things are. And so this is so succinctly stated by the Buddha 2,564 years ago in India, when he said, all conditions are impermanent. Now that's not a doctrine. As a doctrine, it's not very inspiring. Because, what does that mean? All conditions are impermanent. What is a condition? What is a sankhara? What is nibbana? You don't question that. You just say that if you practice according to this right way that I teach, then you'll realize nibbana, ultimate reality. You can believe that, and that can be inspiring to get us started on the path, or started in the practice of stilling the mind or waking to silence of the present moment. But, it's still, belief is a condition we create. And in Buddha Dhamma, it's a convention. Religions are conventions, languages are conventions, thoughts, memories, imagination is all thought created. And so the present moment, the here and now reality is Dhamma, so it's empty, you can't find it. You can't find Dhamma or consciousness as an object. Where is it? And the one thing at this moment, that everybody knows, no matter how ignorant they might be in their belief systems, is that they know they're conscious. But where is it? Can you find it? Can you define it? And then space itself is here and now. So it's like what unifies Ajahn Asoka and myself at this very moment is space and consciousness. We're both in space. The kuti, the shelter I'm living in, is in space. Amravati is in space. The planet Earth is in space. Space has no boundary, no limitation. And it's here and now. And it allows for everything to be, right and wrong, good or bad, good or evil, heaven or hell, angels or devils. Any condition can arise and cease in space. Because conditioned phenomena, samsara, is about birth and death. All conditions are impermanent. So when we take our position as a witness, being the aware, the Puto, the Buddha, the aware of the present moment is like this. Notice it's not judging it. It's not saying that this is the best moment, or this is a real moment, or my space. But it's not claiming space as any personal property. Conscious awareness is not a personal property. You don't create it. You create yourself as a person with thoughts, with memories, with beliefs. The ego, the cultural conditioning, the thinking process is all about creating, believing, and grasping these changing conditions as our reality. You're making them more than what they are in the present moment. So, like a righteous view right now might be even right for the present moment. It's not saying that it's all right is wrong, but it's wisdom to know when right is appropriate. When my view that I believe is right, is appropriate to manifest in speech or action. That takes wisdom, patience, reflective ability to know how to respond to conditions in the present moment that arise. And you can only do that through awareness of the nature of conditioned Dhamma as you experience it, as it comes and rises and ceases in the present.
As we usually fall for beautiful ideals, like you were mentioning, democracy and human rights and saving the planet and whatever religious views, we get blinded by that kind of attractiveness. It kind of grabs the attention. And then that's when we tend to fall for this self-righteousness in the position, grasping it. So how can one train oneself to notice this self-righteousness and sort of step back a bit from all the glitziness of the ideals or the positions or whatever it is we're feeling self-righteous about?
To trust your awareness of them. Like I would, because of my righteous conditioning, cultural conditioning, religious conditioning, I would feel I'm right and this sense of being right or misunderstood or when somebody doesn't agree with me, this sense of being offended or hurt or angry and being rejected or put down by some other righteous person. These are emotions that we tend to get caught into. The sense of being offended by life, by experience of the past, by people disagreeing with us, by being criticized or looked down on or not being appreciated, not being recognized in the way that you feel would be right. And just by reflecting in this way, you begin to observe that this is all about me and mine, this sense of me as this physical body. Ajahn Sumedho is a separate entity in the universe, and in a universe that tends to intimidate and not go along with all my righteous positions. So we find relief from this righteousness through observing it, being a witness, trusting in awareness, because righteousness, this feeling of righteousness, if it's present, it also ceases. And that takes patience rather than trying to just wallow in self-pity or your own righteous views and hating the person that doesn't agree with your view is samsara, it's misery, it's suffering. To be caught in the momentum of emotional habit patterns, of being a separate entity in a vast universe in space, is it's a very threatening way to experience life. Because we do feel quite helpless as separate individuals. What can I do to save the planet? What can I do to save democracy in America? What can I do to keep the purity of the Theravada Buddhist tradition? What can I do, as a person? And you get caught up in plans and ideas, some of them good, some of them pointless. But what is there's awareness of this, that the thinking process is like this whole sense of me as a separate individual in the universe, you can witness that. I would deliberately, intentionally think me, because somehow that pronoun tends to emphasize the separateness. What about me? Do you care about me? Do you acknowledge me? You should respect me. And just this sense, just as I think these words, this sense of me, suddenly stands out as a creation. Because in awareness, there's no me. There's no Ajahn Sumedho. There's just pure conscious awareness, which is liberating. Nibbana, freedom. Where if I operate solely from Ajahn Sumedho, Robert Jackman memories, then at old age, I'm stuck with that, without ever getting free from it, till I drop dead, physically drop dead, without getting any the wiser. Because old people, we have so many memories of our past, of our childhood, of our teenage, of our youth, middle age, and our life in professional terms or in monastic terms, our feeling, the emotions that were early conditioned in childhood still operate in old age. It's so easy to feel offended personally. If somebody starts arguing with me, it's so easy to feel offended and exasperated or just frustrated, or these kind of mental states are observable if you trust awareness. And I remember having insight in the early years in Thailand as a monk and feeling totally confused by my life there. Because it was so different from the conditioning I'd experienced in America. Such a totally different lifestyle than 1960s Berkeley. And yet I deliberately chose this style, I wasn't forced into it. A gun wasn't held to my head to ordain it. I had to request it. And so I put myself in this position quite intentionally, because I did have a lot of trust in Buddhism, 18.Dhamma. And so the confusion of learning another language, learning different cultural attitudes and reactions to life, that tended to confuse me or offend me or boggle my mind, what's going on here. And Ajahn Chah's whole emphasis on being the awareness of it. So, I began to just be aware of confusion. It's like this, feeling totally confused about what I should do, how I should practice, about the Vinaya rules, about the tradition I'm in, about whether I should stay or leave, total confusion and doubt. And I began to see through trusting in this awareness that these mental states, emotional reactions to experiences that are changing. And then you question yourself, what doesn't change is the awareness. Because if you trust your awareness, then your confusion, is present, but it doesn't stay. Try to stay confused, you have to keep holding on to it and confusing your mind with more thoughts. But if you stop that, just observe confusion, mental, emotional confusion is like this. Being aggravated, being doubt-ridden, confused by at the present moment is like this. It's another sankhara, another phenomenon that comes and goes. And you begin to recognize, I remember recognizing the absence of confusion as I accepted it and didn't try to get rid of it, didn't try to get the answer or the solution to the answer to the question, the solution to the problem, just stayed confused, kind of embracing it, allowing it, confusion to be like this. It stopped. There was silence. And then I affirmed, non-confusion is like this. It's empty. And then questioning your own existence, Ajahn Sumedho. What is Ajahn Sumedho? Or Sumedho, because in the early years I wasn't an Ajahn. So, where does Sumedho arise and cease? And when there's no thought of Sumedho or me, there's still conscious awareness. And it's peaceful. And that's one thing I've begun to really appreciate, how peaceful monastic life is if you trust the awareness. So monastic life isn't just, just blind conformity to rules and precepts and belief systems. It's a whole, as it's meant to be, as Luang Cha encouraged, an investigation of experience. And experience is always sankhara. Right now, it's thoughts arise and cease, emotions come and go. The weather changes, the time changes, you get older, the body gets older, you get criticized, you get praised, life goes on in its various manifestations, experiences that become memories of the past, or dreads, or fears, or hopes for the future. So like, what does an old monk like me hope for in the future? When you're old like this, you like to sit in samadhi and just pass out. It's an imaginary perfect death for a Buddhist monk. Have the report say, I found Ajahn Sumedho sitting in full lotus, but he passed on to Nibbana. Peacefully. He died peacefully. He didn't die, he just disappeared. These are all kind of ways of talking and hopes, personal hopes. And that's, the future is the unknown at this moment. Hope is a condition about the future. Hope is not about now, because the now is like this. But hope is everything's going to go well, everything okay, Ajahn Asoko? And you say, yes, everything's fine, everything's okay. And they thank you. Hoping that you say everything's okay. Because if you say no, there's all kinds of problems and crises you've got to solve, and then that presents another emotional problem arising in the present that isn't okay. But the awareness of okay or not okay isn't okay. It's like this. It's peaceful. It's embracing. Like consciousness includes everything. It isn't divisive. It's not embracing righteousness and goodness and rejecting evilness, evil or Satan or badness. Awareness knows that evil and good are conditions, are phenomena that arise and cease. And so our trust is in awareness rather than in a particular position we take on the conditioned level. And that's freedom. That's peace of mind. Escaping the perplexities of the world is through this awareness. Because the world is complex. It's perplexing. Just listening to the news in the morning on BBC, it's all so complicated. And who's right and who's wrong? You know, Israelis or Palestinians or Syrians or Hamas or Taliban or Americans or the European Union or Putin or Lukashenko or the Germans or the Japanese. You know, it's all very confusing when you're listening to news, because you might have preferences and sides that you prefer over one side over the other, but it's not necessarily wisdom. It's wisdom when you realize that by grasping conditions, grasping phenomena is the cause of suffering. So even the most righteous, perfect forms that we can imagine and create with thoughts, with ideas, in themselves are empty phenomena. You know, they have no reality in themselves. So like democracy, human rights, all these are beautiful ideas. And they're directional, like democracy is a good direction to go toward. It's sort of like a guiding star. It's perfect. It gives you direction. But, if you just depend on guiding stars for your life, you're going to fall off the cliff, drown in the ocean. And that's suffering. And that's nothing to do with the star, which is beautiful and perfect. So the ideal of democracy, human rights, they're perfect forms, but they are forms. And there's wisdom to realize that they're limited, where the reality that we take refuge in is conscious awareness here and now, which is not an ideal, it's not a created form, it's not a condition. But it is here and now, and you know it, you're conscious. That's a fact that you don't question.
And then here and now in consciousness, self-righteousness is what?
In what?
Self-righteousness is what? When it's just...
It's just an idea. Just a condition that you might be grasping. And to investigate that grasping of I'm right, observe it, this sense of me, Ajahn Sumedho, I have to be right, is, when you really observe that, and not to deny it, but just this feeling of me alone in the universe as a vulnerable separate form like this, being right, is very lonely and disappointing at 86 years old. If I've spent all these years trying to prove I'm right as an individual form, that would be a terrible disappointment. And because, what if the future is the unknown, and it definitely is the death of the forms, and so that awareness of the cessation of thoughts, of the limitation of ideals is arising and ceasing rather than as absolutes. the realization that your real refuge, in Buddhist terms, is Dhamma. It's perfect, here and now. Like Dhamma is not some abstract metaphysical theory that Buddha thought up. It's the reality of here and now, conscious awareness here and now. And we awaken to that, and suddenly we realize that's our real refuge, not in our righteous views or our fears and hopes for the future. So in old age, you look back and you have all these memories, but they all seem like waves floating in the water. Waves that the sea wind steers, flakes of glad foam. And that's all they are, so they're not like absolutes that one holds to no matter what, and become disillusioned or cynical or bitter about life, about experience. Because we learn from the way things happen to us, whatever karmic conditions we have to live with. Karma is about conditioned phenomena. The law of karma is cause and effect. What arises ceases, what is born dies. So the physical body is a karmic form. And its nature, as it was born a long time ago, it's going to die in a few years. And if that's my identity at this old age, I'd be a sad old man. Or wanting to die, to get out of this trap. Maybe if you believe in oblivion as the ultimate result of when you're dead and that's it. There's nothing, just void, emptiness. You totally disappear. That's another belief. Oblivion is a belief, as well as heaven and hell, as well as samsara and nibbana. But these are just terms that we use not to grasp, but to reflect upon, to see that terms are not reality, that reality is conscious awareness here and now. It's peaceful, it's perfect, it's Dhamma.
Thank you very much, Rinpoche.